Hi, this is Jen Rubin, Editor-in-Chief of the Contrarian. We're delighted to have back with us Senator Sheldon Whitehouse from the great state of Rhode Island. Welcome, Senator.
Thank you. Great to be with you again. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. Judge Boasberg, who is the presiding judge and has taken issue with the administration in the really deceitful deportation of individuals to El Salvador, seems to have revived the contempt proceedings. Tell us what you know and what you're looking at, given the fact that the administration now has developed quite a reputation in the federal courts for not playing it, shall we say, straight with judges.
Yeah. Well, let's start with just a quick review of who Judge Boasberg is. He's the chief judge of the federal court in the District of Columbia, which is one of the bigger and busier federal courts because of its location. He's been the chief judge for a long time. He's very respected. He sits on the Judicial Conference, which is the administrative body that runs the judiciary, chaired by the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. And he came onto the bench as a Republican presidential appointee. And one night, an emergency petition came in saying, we think people are being deported out of the country secretly and without proper procedure to a foreign prison, and we need an emergency hearing. So as the chief judge, he took it. And he ended up getting into quite a mess because what became very quickly apparent is that the Trump administration was not obeying his orders and might have been misleading him with things that they said. And they went back and forth through that night as the planes flew. It was during that night that the famous comment by the senior MAGA Attorney General appointee, Emil Bovee, said to senior Department of Justice prosecutors, if this keeps up, we're going to have to tell federal courts, F you. He didn't just use the F. And we had a whistleblower who was passing along real-time texts from people who heard that. So it's excellent corroboration. So between the failure to turn the planes around, as Boasberg had ordered, and potentially false statements that were made to him in the courtroom by lawyers, and this backdrop of the Department of Justice preparing to tell federal judges, F you, he said, okay, there's probable cause here to have a contempt hearing, which would bring out the facts of what had taken place at the Department of Justice and the Department of Homeland Security in that proceeding. And that is what really lit things up, because the last thing the MAGA Department of Justice wants is a real factual inquiry into what is going on over there. So now he's in the crucible, and we can go through some of the stuff that followed that, but that's how this began. A proceeding that he got sort of roped into, in which it appears he got lied to and had his orders ignored. So he set up a contempt proceeding, and that's where the story actually begins.
Now, for a while there, the administration, the regime, was taking the position, oh, judges don't have the right to do this sort of thing. You can't hold us in contempt. Judge Boasberg doesn't agree with them. And it's an unusual procedure because normally you would have a prosecutor on one side, but there is no prosecutor here because the government is the one who is under scrutiny. What kind of process do you see playing out? And do you think Judge Boasberg is going to push forward and appoint a special master, a special prosecutor, and have a mini trial in his courtroom?
I'm not sure what he's going to do. What I have heard is that in the first instance, he's just going to call witnesses in to lay out under oath what happened and answer his questions and answer the questions of the plaintiff's lawyers and presumably answer the questions of the Department of Justice as well. depending on where that goes, he always has the right to say, okay, this is really getting serious. I need this to be a better like contested proceeding. And therefore I'm going to appoint a lawyer to represent the interest of the court so that I can stay on as the judge. But the backdrop to this is intense pressure being put on Boasberg to not do this contempt hearing. That includes the president, who has called for his impeachment. That includes House MAGA folks who have actually introduced articles of impeachment. It includes this weird administrative stay that you referred to, where 2 Trump judges on the Circuit Court of Appeals dropped an order stopping the contempt proceeding under what's called an administrative stay, which is supposed to be just days. It lasted 4 months, and perhaps not coincidentally, in those 4 months, Emil Bovee, the FU guy, was moved by the Department of Justice through the Senate Judiciary Committee and onto the Circuit Court of Appeals, while the proceeding that would have brought to light his potential prosecutorial misconduct was papered over by these 2 Trump judges by ordering that it be stopped. Pam Bondi, the MAGA Attorney General, also filed a complaint against Boasberg. Very weird complaint alleging that he had violated judicial ethics in the judicial conference with a statement that she claimed he had made. To believe her, you have to believe that this experienced and respected judge made a statement in the judicial conference that was itself an ethics violation, surrounded by all of these other senior judges and the Chief Justice of the United States.
Exactly.
And none of them noticed. So it's almost certainly a sham, but it allows them to say, oh, but there's a disciplinary issue pending against Judge Boasberg. Therefore, he shouldn't be allowed to go ahead with his hearing against us. So I expect we'll see that play out in the next few days. And then there have been 2 sets of Republican senators sending in letters, the first demanding that Boasberg be impeached, and the other, to put timing on it, on Friday last week, the DC Circuit cleared Judge Boasberg of all those stays and said, you're authorized to go ahead and do your contempt hearing. That was Friday. On Monday, 8 senators sent a letter into the chief judge of the DC Circuit, the appellate court above him, saying, this guy needs to be suspended. He shouldn't be allowed to be a judge. Suspend him. So it's really like full court press, anything they can to stop this judge from having this contempt hearing. And he's going ahead now. So look out for more fireworks.
And presumably we're going to get a lot more detail. Let me ask a very basic question. Shouldn't Emil Bovee be a witness?
It would make a lot of sense to have him be a witness. He was there. He was part of what went on. And he was able to evade questions in his hearing from senators because he could refuse to give answers and he could run out the clock. In fact, his hearing, quite unusually in the Senate Judiciary Committee, opened with an injunction from the chairman that the witness should feel free to claim privilege in his answers and not answer our questions. And so there was a lot of privilege asserting by the witness, and your 5 minutes gets burned and pretty soon you're all done. It's very different in a courtroom when you've got a judge watching and even asking the questions. And if you start to give evasive answers, you don't get to have a 5-minute clock run out. He can keep drilling until he gets the truth out of you, until he gets your dodging done. And that's the value of a proper trial with proper cross-examination. So yeah, he should be a part of it. Maybe not in the first round, but sooner rather than later. And frankly, it should go back to his qualifications as a judge, because if he's found to have committed prosecutorial misconduct, then,
Exactly.
you know, judges have responsibilities too.
Well, it seems like many bad ideas originated with him, or he was present during many bad ideas that came up during the Justice Department. time that he was there. Let me switch gears to an issue called the Bevins issue.
Yep.
And that's the name of a Supreme Court case in which made the way for individuals whose constitutional rights have been violated to actually sue. The Supreme Court, in its infinite wisdom over the years, essentially eviscerated that, making it impossible to sue. You've introduced legislation with a member of the House of Representatives. Tell us about that and why, of all things now, of all times now, it is important to reestablish some remedy for people.
Sure. First of all, the law around police officers' liability for injuries and harms that they commit is a mess. If you're a state or county or municipal official, you can be held liable under what's called Section 1983, which has its own mess of judicial complexity and weirdness. It's just not good, clear law. But if you're a federal official, you're not subject to 1983. You're only subject to liability in extremely narrow circumstances that derive from this case, the Bivens case against 6 agents who had violated his constitutional rights. That case has been narrowed down by the Supreme Court to basically its facts. Unless you're doing that exact same thing again, you basically walk clear. So the legislation that I'm proposing does 2 things. One, it lets people who've been injured by federal agents sue as if they were state police or municipal police, which makes perfect sense because a harm that's been administered to someone should be redressed. That's what the justice system is all about. The second thing is the related bill that moves the liability to the employer. Because what happens now in the state, municipal, and county system is that you have to sue the individual police officer. And then there's some back agreement between the police officer and the police department or the town for reimbursement, and it's part of the union negotiations. The whole thing is a mess. In real life, if you slip and fall in a Walmart, you don't have to sue the guy with the mop. You sue Walmart. And that puts the accountability where it belongs, which is at the corporate level to make sure that their employees aren't leaving slippery puddles on the floor. Or if you're a police department, to make sure that your bad police officers or your bad training or your bad whatever it is that's causing these problems gets addressed at your level. So between opening up the prospect for people injured by federal law enforcement to get some redress, basic American principle, and moving the liability to where it belongs, which is at the employer level, because that's where policies are set, procedures are set, training is set, discipline is set, hiring is done, all of that. We can put finally some order into a chaotic and very uncertain area of the law.
Now, how much of your decision to reintroduce this legislation, and you've done it before, this has been an issue that you've been concerned with, has been sparked by the abusive conduct of various federal immigration officials, most recently in Charlotte and other cities in North Carolina, where they seem to be treating people without sort of due process and, more importantly, violently.
Yeah. Well, when you're firing tear gas at children out collecting Halloween candy, or firing stun guns at priests, or fast roping at night out of helicopters into an apartment building and kicking down doors and dragging children out of their beds into the streets at night, zip-tied to each other. I think there's a case to be made that if the victims of those incidents brought a case before a jury, the jury might think pretty skeptically about that. And it's also important that before you actually get to the jury, you have some process where you can get some discovery into who ordered that, who set that up, what were their motives, what were they saying to each other in their emails behind the scenes. You can kind of set the stage for what was really going on. And in many cases, getting that discovery is just as important as getting to the jury. In fact, very often once you've got a good look at the discovery, they say, okay, we'll write the check, get away. We know you got it. You got me.
Absolutely. And I must say, with this president having been given really criminal immunity as far as the eye can see, and a president willing to pardon anybody for anything. It's important to have civil remedies because there's no pardon for
Absolutely.
civil liability. So this at least
Very
puts
important to
some.
focus on the difference between civil and criminal liability.
Good luck with this. Hopefully, it will find some resonance with your colleagues. Just one final point. I want to ask you, I must say, I did think of you when I was listening to the Supreme Court argument on tariffs. And there's justices thinking, which master should we follow? Should we follow Leonard Leo, who doesn't like tariffs, or should we follow the president, who does? Any predictions as to how they're going to get themselves out of this pickle since they have two masters?
I gave up on predicting after the presidential immunity decision. My prediction was that would be a 9-0 decision because it would show the court unified. It would be originalist and textualist, the thing that the conservatives supposedly like, and it would follow the law that has long been the case, all the way back through the Nixon cases and all of that. So it was an easy layup for the court to show we're together, we're solid, these basic rules still apply, no new crazy weird things out of us. And when they didn't, and instead they went off on this weird gallivant to create a presidential immunity, when the Constitution actually addresses immunity, and it gives it to us, it gives it to Congress to protect us from the executive branch. So we can't be arrested on the way to the vote. We can't be hauled off into a prison because of something we said or how we voted on the Senate floor. So the founding fathers actually thought about immunity, and they gave it to legislators, and they didn't give it to the president. And now comes this gang of right-wing judges, and they decide, oh no, we're going to do this for this guy. So I'm all done with trying to predict. But if there's one prediction you can say, it's that they are not bound by the law in their own estimation. They will do whatever they think is best politically for the circle out of which they emerge. And as you point out, it's weird for them now because that circle isn't just the Koch brothers and Leonard Leo and the unified field of court manipulation. Now it's got MAGA coming in and tariff stuff, and there's an internal war in the crowd of court fixers.
Exactly. I think it's going to be fascinating to see how they get themselves out of this. I suspect whatever they do, somehow it's going to be narrow and sui generis, so they don't have to ever go back to saying mean things about the president again. But thank you as always, Senator, and thank you for your good cheer. Happy Thanksgiving, and let's be grateful for lower court judges who have been really punching above their weight lately.
They have been punching above their weight and behaving very honorably. So happy Thanksgiving to you, and happy Thanksgiving to them.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Senator. We look forward to seeing you soon.
Thanks, Jen.